Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Business and Leaders Luncheon that we are calling Gresham Economic Trends and Indicators, where we will cover economic recovery from the pandemic, recession, current and future state of the labor market, and an overview of specific characteristics of the Gresham economy specifically. I would like to say thank you to our presenting sponsors. We have Aero Sanitary Service, Umpqua Bank, the Boeing Company, Mount Hood Community College. Our stakeholder sponsor, Gresham Barlow School District. Our venue sponsor is the Quality Inn. We love this space. And to our media sponsor, MetroEast Community Media. And Keith, as always, for setting us up for success. Thank you so much. We are recording the webinar today, and it'll be available through the cable channels for MetroEast Media and through the Chamber website as well. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge a board member we have present, our very own treasurer, Warner Allen. Thank you for coming. And in addition, we have two of our elected officials here. We have Councilor Janine Gladfelter, there she is, and Councilor Jerry Hinton. Thank you guys so much. So, welcome again to today's presentation, where we will embark on a journey to explore the economic trends and indicators that shape the city of Gresham's economy. This presentation is designed to provide an overview of Gresham's economic landscape, highlighting its unique characteristics and the impact it has on each of us as residents, businesses, and stakeholders in the community. Gresham is a city with a rich history and a vibrant community, and our economic landscape is a crucial part of what makes Gresham special, and understanding its dynamics is essential for shaping our future. We are privileged to be joined by Jake Procino. Did I say that right? Thank you. He is a workforce economist for the Oregon Employment Department, specializing in the labor market for Multnomah County specifically. He provides data analysis and economic advice to local businesses, business associations, and government agencies to facilitate decision making. I am very much looking forward to this personally and to diving into what makes Gresham tick, what opportunities may be out there that are unexplored, and walk away with information that we can hopefully look back and say, I remember hearing about this and I really am glad I was there. So Jake has volunteered to open this up for questions during the presentation. Normally we wait until afterwards, so if you would like to ask a question in the middle, just raise your hand and I will come by with a microphone so that everybody can hear your question. And so without further ado, let's welcome Jake.
Oh, no worries. Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me. Always love presenting about the economic trends. And hopefully this will be geared towards Gresham in particular, and you all take something away from it. So, again, to reintroduce myself, my name is Jake. I am an economist with the Oregon Employment Department, which is a state agency, but I am regionally focused on Multnomah County and all the cities including Portland and Gresham, Troutdale, Fairview, what have you. So today's presentation is going to be largely divided into three sections. First, I'm going to cover the recovery from the pandemic recession. Then I'm going to talk about the labor market broadly. And then third, just talk about characteristics of Gresham's labor economy. From this presentation, I don't think there's anything that you're not going to be unfamiliar with, but if you have any inclinations to what Gresham or the economy is like, hopefully this will give you confidence in what you're hearing. So first, I want to start with two maps, just so we're on the same page, because the nomenclature around geography here in the Portland metro region can be a bit confusing. So first, I want to talk about the Portland Metropolitan Statistical Area. It's the Portland, I think it's the Portland, Hillsborough, Vancouver, the Portland, Vancouver, Hillsborough. It's a 7-county area, including Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Washington, Yamhill, Columbia, and in Washington includes Clark and Skamania. So when I say the Portland MSA, It's a 7-county region. It's a fairly big region. The Portland Metro region, when I say Portland Metro, in this presentation I'm talking about only Multnomah and Washington County specifically. The Portland Tri-County area is Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas, and the Portland 5 is the Oregon portion of the entirety of the Portland MSA. And then the second map, I will be using this. This is the Gresham and Troutdale PUMA, which stands for Public Use Microdata, if you're curious. This is a geography that the census uses. And so they combine several areas in East County, Multnomah. So they have, so their estimates are significant, because if you just do any one small region, the population is going to be too small to make accurate estimates. So they combine a large chunk of East County. So when I talk about Gresham and Troutdale, frequently I'll be referring to this area. All right, so do you want to take a picture of it?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So first, let's just talk about the recovery from the pandemic recession starting in January 2020 and largely moving up to this past August. So Oregon, as of right now, has regained all the jobs lost in 2020 in aggregate. It currently sits at 0.7% or almost 1% above pre-pandemic employment level. And notably, it is a much faster recovery than the Great Recession. So we're 43 months out from the start of the recession, and we're almost 1% of pre-pandemic employment. Compared to the Great Recession, Oregon was still 7% behind in aggregate. And so 43 months is June 2011. The Great Recession started December 2007. It is a much quicker recovery. The main reason for that is that the pandemic recession was characterized by temporary layoffs. So you can see, I'm going to gesture and try not to move the microphone too much, continue speaking to the microphone. But it's a little hard to see, but that dark blue line is the number of people who are unemployed on temporary layoff. The light blue line is the number of permanent job losers, and the yellow line is people who are unemployed who have completed temporary jobs. And you can see the difference here. During the pandemic recession, the number of people on temporary layoff spiked. So a lot of people lost their job, but the companies that hired them that laid them off, they still existed. And then shortly later, were able to hire them back fairly quickly. In contrast, the Great Recession, a lot of people were laid off, and then the companies went out of business. So when economic environment started to improve, the companies weren't there to hire them back. So this is part of the reason why the pandemic recession, it's been a very quick recovery compared to recessions generally. And this quick recovery has been characterized by very quick employment gains. You can see that while employment gains are slowing, they are still so this is year over year. I probably should start by describing the graph. So this is year over year job growth and decline from the previous year. And you can see, obviously, during COVID, during the start of COVID, there was a lot of job loss. But since the start about 2021, there has been record very high job growth, even higher than the last expansion period of from around 2012 to 2016, 17, 18, which was the previous job expansion before 2020. And although it's been slowing a little bit, like job growth has been slowing, it's still a very healthy job growth that we're seeing in Oregon. Yes, question?
In the 2020, the total loss,
I can repeat the question.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, okay.
on the bottom of the graph there, 2020
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It says it's just above 250,000 lost. And then the top green one in the recovery, it's not to 250 exactly. So are we still below? We haven't recovered all that we lost. At least that's what it looked like in that graph.
It's a little hard to calculate because with this kind of graph, it's year over year. I wouldn't try to make any estimates using the graph. We lost that many. In I think this is March 2020, we lost 250,000 jobs, right? And this isn't like new job loss. This is compared to the previous year. So March 2020 compared to March 2019, there was 250,000 fewer jobs. But I'm guessing this is December 2020, there was only 100,000 fewer jobs than there were previously. So it's not, these numbers reflect this one as well, if that makes sense. And so that's, I wouldn't try to make any calculations off of this, just Oregon in general. And this is Oregon at large. This is not any specific situation. This is Oregon at large. So particular industries or particular people may be struggling, but on aggregate, on the whole, Oregon is seeing employment recovery. Now, as I mentioned, oh yes, a question?
It might be silly, but I have a professor who says that there's no silly question. So I see the recession, but does inflation also affects, like the jobs?
So inflation doesn't affect jobs. It will affect wage, but doesn't affect whether or not someone's hired.
Can someone take 2 jobs instead of 1?
Yes. I will actually touch on that in a moment, but a bit of a spoiler, I guess. I won't talk about it too much, but just to touch on it, we've actually seen the multiple job holding rate for a while from like about 2020 to from 2020 and 2021, we saw the multiple job holding rate decline significantly. But as of 2020 and more recently, has been getting back to normal. So fewer people were holding multiple jobs for various reasons, but it's kind of evening out a little bit more. Yes, actually, good question though. So that is to say that the job recovery. That is to say, in other words, that is to say that the job recovery hasn't been because people are holding multiple jobs, if that makes sense. And yes, I'll actually touch on that again. So several broad sectors of the economy have seen employment above pre-recession levels back in March. So this is looking at March in particular. So this is not current, but it illustrates a point of how quickly different industries have recovered, or like how different industries have been affected. So this is from February 2020 to March 2023. Again, this is not current. But we can see that the job industries that were impacted more heavily were industries like leisure and hospitality, healthcare and social assistance, other services, education, government, such and such. And it's industries that have recovered fairly quickly and fairly well have been things like professional business services, construction, transportation, warehousing, and utilities. Now, how much a particular industry was affected was largely based on 2 big factors. The first being, could they work from home, or could they, work in a physically distanced fashion? And you can see that something like leisure and hospitality, it's all in person, basically. So they were impacted quite heavily. The second big reason was the average wage. And again, this is where leisure and hospitality comes into effect, is that they have the lowest, of all the industries, they have the lowest average wage. And thus it's harder to attract employees back, because if they're just looking for higher wage occupations, they're going to look in other industries other than relatively low paying leisure and hospitality. And you can kind of see it more in effect here. So this is that same graph, but this time it's organized by average wage. And you can see that industries like information and professional business services and construction that offer higher than average pay, which is about $64,000 a year in Oregon, had a much easier time getting employees back compared to, again, leisure and hospitality, but retail, trade, private education services, and healthcare and social assistance. Again, looking at the quickness of recovery, again, this is not updated. But largely what differentiates different areas is not necessarily, it is in part due to particular local economic conditions of kind of what's going on. But it more has to do with what type of industries that the area has. So you can see on this graph, for existence as an example of what I'm talking about, you can see Las Vegas, which has a lot of leisure and hospitality, right? Because they have a lot of gambling services and hotels and such. They suffered amongst the worst job losses, and same with Orlando and Disney World. The most job losses because they had the leisure and hospitality sector decline significantly, right? So how well or how quickly a metropolitan, an MSA, a metro region recovered is largely due to their industrial composition, if you will. And then the second major reason is population change. And so you can really see this in the top of the list. Most of those metro areas, Austin, Dallas, Raleigh, Jacksonville, Tampa, Nashville, they're all places in the southern region, which have seen huge population gains since 2020. The Sun Belt, a lot of Sun Belt places have seen huge population gains. And so they're able to, because they have more people, they have more employment in those areas. So that is the big reason. This is a lesson I want you to take away from industries and quickness of recovery. Now, looking at Oregon in particular, as of July 2023, this is a chart of how many jobs a county has compared to February 2020 levels. And you can see that Multnomah County is lagging behind other Portland MSA counties, so the other 5 in Oregon, and largely lagging statewide compared to other places. So you can see these places in light teal, I want to call it. These light teal, like Multnomah County, Lane County, and Douglas County, they're having a slower recovery of about 89% of February 2020 employment levels. But the other areas around, such as Columbia, Washington, Clackamas, and Yamhill counties are recovering very quickly. So the reason for this is because, I think I'm going to show this later. Actually, I'm going to skip a slide real quick, but I'm going to skip a couple slides real quick. Is because in Multnomah County, and this includes Portland and Gresham and all the cities in Multnomah County, is because of the lagging leisure and hospitality industry. Now, this is a little delayed, but this leisure and hospitality hasn't changed much. Multnomah County in particular has suffered, and largely this is because of people working from home. So usually pre-2020, people would go to the office, and then during lunch or after work, they would go out and go to restaurants or bars or what have you, and utilize leisure and hospitality businesses. But since people work from home, and work from home in Multnomah County is 9% in 2019, and as of yesterday, the numbers were just released, and I believe it's 23% of people in Multnomah County now work from home. And so a lot of these kind of service industries centered around people working at the office have really suffered, and they're not really coming back as long as people aren't going to the office, which it looks like it's going to maintain. But you can see also in Multnomah County, Some other lagging sectors in particular have been manufacturing, financial activities, and education. But professional business services, of which in Oregon has been kind of a very strong area of growth, is doing well in construction, and trades, transportation, and utilities. So just going back a little bit. So this is more recent. So what I showed you previously was comparing 2019 to now. This is year over year. And you can see that the Portland MSA region over the last 12 months ending in May has grown 3%, which is pretty middling amongst the top 50 metro regions in the United States by job number. So even though, as you can see here, Portland was lagging behind slightly over the past year, we're seeing more job growth. And you can see it here too. And so an area like leisure and hospitality, which still hasn't reached its pre-pandemic levels yet, is growing faster in the past year, along with healthcare and social assistance. They have a lot of ground to make up, but they've been able to hire more in the past year. And so just to touch on what's happening a little bit, and so this was brought up about multiple job holders. So these numbers are all by business. So a business in Multnomah County, you count how many jobs they have, and the workers could live anywhere. All right, so the workers could live anywhere. This number is the number of employed. It's an unemployment statistic, one of the ways that one of the statistics you use to measure unemployment. But you can see that the number of employed people in Multnomah County, so this is by person living in Multnomah County, not businesses by business in Multnomah County. You can see that the number of people employed is estimated to be higher, if not the same, if higher. These numbers are a little weird, than 2020. So what does this mean? It means that people in Multnomah County are working, but the jobs where they're working, it could mean a twofold of things. One, people from outside the county aren't coming into the county to work anymore, or people in the county are working out. People in the county are working outside the county. But this is to show that the people are working in the county. It's just the dynamics of what that actually looks like has changed. And then the last thing I just want to touch on is this is the unemployment rate in Oregon counties. This is all to say that the unemployment rate is near historical lows. Here's Multnomah County in particular. This is Oregon. This is all to say that like people across the state are working. Where the jobs are might have changed, but unemployment is really low, which is a good thing. So that's just kind of the employment situation, end of part one. Does any questions before I move on to the state of the labor economy? Cool. All right, we'll take a breath. The main lesson I want to take from this second part, what I want you to take, is that the cyclical labor shortage is gone, but the structural shortage remains. So we've heard a lot about how businesses have had issues hiring people. Now, that has started to relax a little bit, but it's still a fairly tight labor market. I just want to start by looking at Oregon's labor force. And we can see it's dipped a little bit recently, but since 2020, Oregon's civilian labor force has increased considerably. So people are working. And we can look at it across education levels, and we can see that people with a bachelor's degree, it didn't. The 2020 didn't hit them as hard, but people with some college or less were hit more hard because of the particular drop in service jobs. But they are back in the labor force. This is to say that people are coming back. They're willing to work again, what have you. So if the workers are coming back, why is the labor market tight? There are two main reasons. The first, sorry, did you want to take a picture of one of the sites? Oh, okay. The first main reason is that the number of job vacancies in the Portland metro, Multnomah and Washington counties, was higher in 2022 than at any time during the survey's history, which started in 2015. So there's a lot of, it's hard to see that, but you can see that there was over 30,000 job vacancies at any given time in the Portland metro region during 2022, and this is largely held into 2023. So even though that there are a lot of people working and there are a lot of people looking for jobs, there's a lot of businesses hiring. So there's only so many people for all the very, very high number of job vacancies out there. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is that people are aging out of the workforce. So this graph is showing the annual retirements, which is defined as people over 60 not in the labor force. And you can see this is the historical trend, and then you can see the Oregon Office of Economic Analysis, their projection moving forward. And you can see that the number is very high historically. You can see that in 2010s, you're averaging maybe 15,000 a year, but it's really spiked since post 2015 and is going to remain elevated, or projected to remain elevated all through 2030. So this means why this is because a lot of the baby boomer generation is retiring, and young entrants into the labor force, they're just not enough people to replace those that are retiring. And this is in part due to a declining birth rate and a bit of slowing migration. So you can see the Oregon population by age. Now this is really hard to see, but basically what I want you to take away from this graph is that this boomer generation for people about, I want to say 58 to 75, you can see that there's about over 50,000 people per age number. So there's about 50,000 people that are 61, 50,000 people that are 62 and such. And you can see compared to this Gen Z, this group denominated as Gen Z, all of their levels are below 50,000 and trickling down. So despite that millennials is the largest generation by generation by population, they're already in the workforce. This Gen Z, there's just fewer of them in Oregon, and the generation following is also considerably less. So it's a bit of a warm body problem. There just aren't as many. There's a lot of people leaving the workforce and not enough people entering the workforce to replace them. And typically in Oregon, net migration into Oregon has made up for that lack of birth rate. But you can see in 2021 or 2020, 21, and 2022 that these numbers are lower than they have been historically. So you'd get about maybe 60,000 people entering in, migrating into the state of Oregon per year, but it has really dropped since then. And even though these are the state of Oregon, it largely applies to Multnomah County. So with all those factors in mind, we'll take a look at this graph. This is the tight labor market in the Portland metro area, again, Multnomah and Washington counties. So this yellow bar is the number of job vacancies. This blue bar is the number of unemployed people, so people looking for a job. And then this green is this green trend line is the ratio between them. So you can see largely the number of unemployed people is higher than it was in 2019. You're having about 30,000 people-ish looking for jobs. But this yellow line, which goes from about 15,000 people per quarter, has really elevated, has doubled basically, and held around 30,000 job vacancies, and has declined slightly, but is still elevated above 20,000 here in late 2022 and 2023. So the number of unemployed people has largely remained pretty low. In 2019, which was pretty low, there was about 2+ people per job vacancy, and during 2022 and largely what we're seeing now, there's fewer than 2, even 1. So if you have this is to say that if you have a job posting out there, you can maybe hypothetically expect only about 2 people to apply for your job. And this is not accounting for qualifications or experience or what the job demands. So it's at least regionally, it's really hard. It can be hard on aggregate for businesses to hire. So that's what I have for the labor market. Any questions before I move on to the final section? Cool. And lastly, the third topic, I just want to touch on the characteristics of Gresham and East Multnomah County and look really narrowly at Gresham and the surrounding area. So first, over the last 10 years, Gresham has seen solid economic growth. From 2012 to 2021, even though there's a dip because of COVID, and it's probably this chart's about to be updated in the next few days, which is unfortunate for this particular presentation. But even accounting for 2021's depressed employment and jobs and overall economic situation, Gresham has seen an 18% growth in real payroll and a 17% growth in employment. So Gresham's just seen, this is to say, good economic conditions as in the last decade. This chart shows the employment share by industry compared to Oregon in 2021, and this is that PUMA, that East County, Gresham, and Fairview that I showed earlier. And you can see, at least compared to Oregon, Gresham has particular industry, higher shares of industry employment. You can see transportation and warehousing is a huge one. It tends to have more manufacturing, construction as larger parts of the economy. And it tends less to focus on public administration, information sector, and real estate and professional, scientific, and technical. So, profiling Gresham, it might have been less you could argue that the growth in transportation and warehousing that has been seen largely across Oregon has been a bit of a boon for Gresham because it's a larger part of the employment share. And things like construction, of which is a slightly large construction, which has been booming. Those parts of the post-2020 employment expansion have helped the Gresham area. So I talked about age being an issue in Oregon, and you can kind of see it similar in Gresham. Gresham tends to be younger than Oregon. The median age in Oregon is approximating here. The median age in Oregon is about 41. Median age in Gresham is about 40. And the median age in the U.S. is about like 38, 39. So Gresham tends to be slightly older than the U.S., but younger than Oregon. So in Oregon, so the red one is U.S., the green is Oregon, and the dark blue is Gresham. You can see that Gresham tends to have fewer retirees, more people of working age in route setting prime. These are just what they're named. They're not necessarily representative of the people in them. Tend to see more late career working age than Oregon, and in the U.S. in general. Tends to see fewer children than the U.S., but more than Oregon, and tends to have fewer college-age people compared to the U.S. So but Gresham may not have as much of an issue as the rest of Oregon in replacing its workforce, at least naturally. By naturally, that's ignoring migration. But it's still going to have these issues compared to the U.S. Yes?
Wait.
Oh.
Is this based on Gresham's population, or is this based on employer?
This is population. This is pure population.
Okay, thanks.
These numbers actually came out last week, which is really fun. It's really nice. It's always nice when it's fresh data. A couple other things. Educational attainment varies widely across Multnomah County, and Gresham tends to have fewer people with a bachelor's degree or more. Only about a quarter of the population over 25 has a bachelor's degree, which is less compared to Oregon, the rest of Oregon, the U.S., and the other areas around Portland. which is to say that the population in Gresham, and every area has their different their skills, and so a place when you have more education, it tends to be more scientific or research based. But when you have a less educated workforce, it could be more, say, construction based or manufacturing or what have you, to pull so labor skill to pull from in the area. And the last thing I want to show is one of my favorite websites. This thing is from On the Map, which is a census website. It shows you where workers live and where residents work. And so you can see this dark blue is the number of people, or sorry, not dark blue, dark green is, the number of people who work in Gresham but live inside. The yellow is the number of people who live in Gresham but work outside the city. And then this lighter green is the number of people that work and live inside Gresham. And you can see, and this actually tends to be the case for a lot of the Portland metro region. But a lot of people tend to either be coming in or leaving for their job. So not a lot of people who live in Gresham, well, relatively, it's 6,000, so it's a lot of people, but a relatively smaller share of people live and work in Gresham, which I find interesting, but it's not that different than other places in Portland. There's a lot of commuting happening in and around the area. Particularly where they work, it makes sense. Most people who live in Gresham, they tend to work in Portland, about 42% of them. 15%, the second largest there is Gresham, but then there's a lot of other places. So 26% isn't listed here, but they tend to work around Troutdale, Beaverton, Tigard, Hillsborough, Salem, Vancouver, around in the area, as everywhere else pretty much in the Portland MSA do. Where Gresham workers live, most of them come from Portland and Gresham, as you'd expect. A lot of them come from Vancouver, Troutdale, Fairview, Hillsborough, and Sandy. But 40% are not listed. So it's just, usually you would see that in the area. So that is actually all the slides I have to show at the moment. In summation, Oregon broadly is doing pretty well in terms of aggregate job growth, but we've seen it's different by industry, and industries like leisure and hospitality are lagging, and industries like construction are expanding quite fast, at least since February 2020. But we're seeing it even out, like healthcare and leisure and hospitality are expanding a lot in the past year. Regarding the labor force, there's going to be structural shortage moving forward because of the aging of the workforce. And those last insights about Gresham, of which are a little bit varied for me to some. But happy to take your questions. If you have any, happy to talk more. Yes.
Of course, Tom has a question. Is there any way to determine why the immigration count is down and why people are leaving, whether it be Multnomah County or the state of Oregon? Why are people coming in? Why are people leaving?
Yeah. So there's one big factor I'll point to. The first is that migration in Oregon has historically been pro-cyclical. That is to say, during good economic times, people move to Oregon. So you can spot in other words, you can spot where the recessions are on this graph, right? You can see it, you can really see the, I forget what happened here specifically, but this is the collapse of logging industry. So a lot of people left during the 80s. You can see the dot-com bubble here. And you can see the Great Recession here, and you can see the COVID recession there. So it's pro-cyclical. So part of it is due to the economic downturn. And this is to 2022, so we'll see what 2023 holds. So that's big issue number one. The other one is a bit more hairy, it's a bit more fuzzy. There's been, I remember KGW did a news report on this report study that at least the city of Portland did. And while a lot of issues like people talked about crime and homelessness as being issues, the main reason that people left Multnomah County was because of the affordability issue. They left because their housing became unaffordable, and they were looking for a cheaper place to live. So that is largely the other reason. A lot of people have moved to Vancouver because of the cheaper housing, or they might be moving, say, to Salem or Woodburn, which are close by, but they're much cheaper places to live. So I'd say those are the two big factors, and then other issues, other quality of life issues probably factor in at least a little bit at the margins. Yes.
Thank you. So just to piggyback a little bit off of that question, on the business end of it, do we have any statistics of businesses leaving, whether it be Multnomah County, Portland, or Oregon, and how that affects these numbers?
Yeah. There's not great numbers, but talking with the regional economist, in short, a lot of businesses have left, for Multnomah County specifically, just have left the Portland and other areas because when people work from home, you don't have the same benefits of being in Multnomah County that you would when people go to the office. So a lot of people a lot of companies have just left because there's no reason. Oh, yeah.
And just to piggyback up again, those that have left, individuals, are they, what age group primarily? Or is it across the board, or is it mainly retirees, young people?
Yeah, I don't think I have this graph with me at the moment, but I did do an analysis of this actually. The largest by age, the largest demographics leaving are kids under 17, and let me remind myself the age groupings, or it's this one, yeah. So you see a lot of like people 30 to 35 to 54. Those are the particular age groups leaving, and especially children under 17. You've seen more college age and route set. Again, these are categories. College age and route setting has been coming into Multnomah County. Children and prime working and peak earning have been largely departing. Yes, that would be the assumption. I don't know if that's entirely true, but that would be the assumption. Yeah.
Have there been any studies that have shown the effect of tax structures in Multnomah County, specifically as compared to other places, as a reason for businesses leaving and individuals leaving?
There have been, and you'll probably need to follow up with me because I don't know them off the top of my head, and I can send them to you. I'll give you my business card. It would seem though that since there isn't the benefit of being in Multnomah County, that those Multnomah County taxes could possibly be a disincentive for companies to remain headquartered in the county.
I had a quick question. So
Yeah.
you said something about college ages, and what I'm wondering is, are you seeing college enrollment go down in the state, or are people graduating here and then moving out of state? Is that why we have a lower proportion of college graduates here staying? Does that correlate?
I don't know this specifically, and off the top of my head, so I can definitely get that to you. What I do know off the top of my head is that people generally, especially for like community college, tend to go to the community colleges around them, and then they tend to be employed the vast majority tend to stay around where they get educated, at least for like places like community colleges. It's really the declining enrollment is really like this demographic shift of just there being fewer young people, at least especially compared to like the millennial generation. That's the biggest reason for a decline in enrollment. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. One more.
I just can't quite get the numbers to correlate, because when you said the biggest group moving out of Oregon are 17-year-olds on their own without their parents.
The other category that are moving out are their parents. So you link the two together, and it makes sense.
And I can link the two together, but I just want to make sure that that was the data that was linked together, that it is the children of that group, because I didn't hear him say that, so I didn't want to make an assumption.
The data just does it by age. It doesn't say family units.
But it has to be.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, you don't have kids moving out on their own, so yeah, that would point to families.
Yep. They don't leave ever. Any other questions for Jake? All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
I mean, I can also just show this one on youth population percentage change. Over the last 10 years, the number of people under 17 in Multnomah County has dropped by 8.5%. And you see that across Oregon. In Columbia County, also 8%, and in Yamhill, almost 10%. Pretty much everywhere across Oregon you see negative, except for Bend. Bend has seen a large increase in migration. So, yeah, okay, cool. Yes, question.
Sorry, go ahead. Would you be the person that would also have data of like wages compared to like the housing market, and like, the cost of living and wages? Do you have that data also?
Yeah, so the question was asked, do I have the data of, for the online webinar, the question was asked if I have data on like housing compared to wages. Yeah, I do. I didn't have it in this particular one because I didn't talk much about housing, but yes, if you're interested in that, I can send you data on average income compared to average cost of like housing. Now, cost of living gets a little bit more hairy. Because it varies from person to person, and it's a little harder to measure as compared to housing. Housing is really easy to measure price-wise, relatively easy to measure. So housing versus income is definitely something that is I can easily send to anyone. Cool. Thank you. All right. Last thing, I send out a monthly economic indicators for Multnomah County. Some of you may be on it already, but if you're interested in that, just send me an email. Again, I have a bunch of business cards. It's right there. You can find me on the qualityinfo.org website. I send out a monthly newsletter. Please reach out. I'm a public employee. Anyone can ask for my services, which are free. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll hang around for a little bit, so you can feel free to come up to me and ask me questions. Again, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks, Jake. We really appreciate the information. I hope everybody had the opportunity to ask the questions that they were dying to ask. And if there are any further, of course, just follow up with him or let us know and we can make the connection for you. I just wanted to announce that we will have our next luncheon here at the same place on October 17th. We're going to try and stick with the economic theme. We're going to focus on Rockwood, and we're going to have Lynn and Brad Ketch from the Rockwood CDC, because we really want to focus on that community. Even though it is Gresham, it's a part of Gresham that has its own set of unique characteristics, and we would really like to dive into that and bring some good information. So please check your calendars and don't forget to register for that. Again, would like to thank our sponsors, Aerosanitary, Umpqua, the Boeing Company, Mount Hood Community College, also Gresham Barlow School District, the Quality Inn and MetroEast Community Media, and then to our restaurant, our member restaurant, Fred Asa. He was supposed to be here, he didn't, but that's Kuya's Islander Cuisine. It was wonderful. I hope you enjoyed it. We do have a little bit extra, so if you can figure out how to get it on a plate and get it home without spilling it, please help yourself. And in addition, if you didn't see hot off the presses, our directory, we just got it delivered yesterday. So if you didn't get it in your Outlook or in your mailbox, we have some on the table. Please help yourself. It is a labor of love and has all of our member businesses in the back. So if you're looking for referrals or just something fun to put on your coffee table, this will do it. And thank you again for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it, and have a good rest of your week.